Good evening and welcome to a final in a series of forums with candidates for office for November 5th that is being brought to you from WDWN 89.1. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On November 5th, the voters in the city of Auburn can choose to re-elect Mayor Michael D. Quill, a Democrat, to a four-year term, or bring back former Republican Mayor Timothy C. Lattimore, who is the Cuyahoga County Legislature's Vice Chairman, who was elected 16 years ago, or bring in newcomer Libertarian Tracy. We are delighted to have all three candidates for mayor here in the studio for this final forum. The position of mayor is a part-time job. It pays $10,889 annually with benefits. Representing the press, as usual, is a familiar face, Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen, who will be asking the questions as he has done for the past 6 forums, but also for the past 15 years. Prior to the taping of this forum, the candidates drew to see what order they would be giving their 2-minute opening statements in. That order will be reversed at the end of the forum for their closing statements. Our candidates who are sitting in the order of their opening statements are Tracy, who's on the Libertarian line, Timothy C. Lattimore, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent line, and Mayor Michael D. Quill, who is on the Democratic, Conservative, and Democratic Working Families and Auburn Party. We want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for this final forum. We're going to start with Mr. Tracy, who's on the Libertarian line. Mr. Tracy, you have 2 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brett Tracy, and I'm running as your endorsed candidate by the Libertarian Party for mayor in the city of Auburn. My goal is to reclaim Auburn as a place where anyone can see opportunity and a better future. I thank you all for having me with you this evening, and I hope to bring something meaningful to the table. The people see a stacking list of issues facing our city. Young people are disproportionately affected by addiction. Safe, productive activities for kids are significantly lacking, and the successful young people leave for jobs and a life of economic opportunity elsewhere. The middle class cannot expect to shop at a local business owned by a neighbor in most cases, much less own one themselves. This trend of tightening down the struggle on local commerce has led to the largest corporate interests benefiting more than local industrialists and entrepreneurs, right down to reducing the number of parking spots downtown and forcing people to drive in backwards against public opinion. Lots of middle management jobs are lost without our manufacturing and industry. It's not supposed to be all fast food and retail. The poor suffer under serious issues and widespread disparities that government workers would not accept for their families and should not accept for yours. There's a serious lack of affordable housing. With a poor infrastructure like unsafe sidewalks and water, and a lack of public transportation, 73% graduation rate. It is widely felt by citizens that I met going door to door that there is no place for them in government. They are not heard and can expect retaliation if they ask for help. I believe the government is a place for all people, regardless of race, religion, personality, disability, to feel welcome, to feel heard, and to see change Victory's hometown. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. We'll now hear from Timothy C. Lattimore, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines. Mr. Lattimore.
Good to see you. Glad to be here. I'm an alumni of this fine institution. It was a couple of moons ago when we dedicated this beautiful studio. We had Rod Serling. I don't know whether any of you know, but that was the gentleman who did the Twilight Zone. But anyways, it's been wonderful to be here again. You deserve a strong, independent leader, a leader who's not afraid to stand up and do what is in the best interest of the hardworking taxpayers like yourself. We need leaders with a vision for making sure that Auburn continues to be a great place to live, work, and raise a family and retire. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. We'll hear from the incumbent, Mayor Michael D. Quill, who's on the Democratic Working Families and the Auburn Party.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Over the past several years, Auburn has experienced progress, and I am running for re-election to keep the progress going. As your mayor, I am proud to work with our city manager and a dedicated staff of over 300 professionals throughout the city to provide local government service delivery. No individual can solve our problems. Rather, I see it as a team effort. Here's a breakdown of what I look forward to continuing to work on with our city team over the next 4 years. Recently, we were awarded the state's Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant of $10 million. This grant will leverage another $25 million of investment in our downtown area to move forward over a dozen major revitalization projects. Our downtown has had great success in recent years, and the next round of investments will move us to an even better position. We're working hard to address our infrastructure needs. We have had great success with obtaining state and federal grants to pay for projects such as to rebuild North Division Street Bridge. We have strong partnerships with our state and federal elected representatives, and our city team has worked hard to secure millions of dollars in state and federal government money so that we can fix our infrastructure at a minimal expense to the local property taxpayer. Next year, we will be replacing the State Street Bridge near the Auburn Correctional Facility, and after that, we'll replace the Aurelius Avenue Bridge. Keeping our drinking water safe across the state, we are experiencing algal blooms issues in our lakes, and we've been focused on this matter with Owasco Lake, which is the source of our public drinking supply. Keeping a handle on city finances keep local government affordable for local property taxpayers. During my tenure as mayor, there were times that city finances were in bad shape, and previous council majorities micromanaged finances in a manner that was not productive. One of the biggest accomplishments that our current city council has made is stabilize city finances. We've worked on a long range of financial plan and is working very well for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Quill. We'll now hear from Mr. Boyer. He will ask each of the candidates questions. If they are for all the candidates, we'll rotate around. If it's for all candidates, we'll start with Mr. Tracy and we'll work our way through and then reverse. And then if there's a question for just one of you, that person gets 2 minutes and their opponents get 1 minute rebuttals if they wish or follow-ups. And then we'll rotate that way. Mr. Boyer, welcome back.
All right, thank you, and thanks to the three of you for coming today to do this, to answer some questions. And since this is the last one, I want to thank Guy for all you do. We thank all these other people. We never thank you, but I know it's always a monumental undertaking to wrangle 18 candidates into time slots, and I know Professor Keeler appreciates it as well, and it's a great thing for our community. So thanks. So with that, let's dive into some questions. One of the things we've had the chance to meet, at the Citizen with all three of you, and you really gave us three quite different responses to the public safety building project that's proposed. It's a major municipal building project at Seminary Commons Plaza to move the fire department there, and I'd just like to kind of have you each talk about your views on the project, whether it's needed, the site that's been selected, and just really whether we should or shouldn't be moving forward on it. So,
Mr. Tracy, you have 2 minutes on the public safety building.
Okay, the public safety building. First, I think it's very strange to me that all these public buildings, all these municipal buildings, need to be upgraded and increased in size and funding for a population that's shrinking at the same time. They say this is about insurance reasons, that they're allowing the current use. I'm not seeing that. If this was a dire need that the floor is going to collapse, we wouldn't be having firemen going beneath. We wouldn't be putting $1.2 million trucks on the floor. Wouldn't be happening. The location, they say they want to be respectful of the neighboring properties and the recovering neighborhood there. That neighborhood's gone under a very good transformation in the last 10 years. It's walkable now. You wouldn't choose to walk that street in daylight. Now you could walk it at night. They tell me They told me that they wanted to purchase the building for $990. The previous purchase was $350 in 2011. It's currently assessed, I think it's I believe it was $720. I have notes on that if I need to, but so we're paying more than it's assessed, almost triple what it was purchased for, to acquire a building that then they told me they have no site plans, no mock-ups, no blueprints. They don't know which parts are usable, which parts aren't. There's asbestos in the building. It's built in the early 50s. I think a feasibility report would have been a good idea. A previous city manager had done a study with a computer program, found that the former Dunn McCarthy lot was better. I feel like, why would you take this and put it in the middle of a neighborhood when currently it's sitting in the middle of the arterial? I don't see any reason to believe that they're going to do this in a respectful way to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Leader Lattimore on the issue of the public safety building.
As you know, I was on the city council and I was mayor. And I mean, I'm all in favor of public safety. That's the number one issue in everybody's mind. And I mean, it's a shared services with the county. Mr. Daggett, our city manager, came over, and I was willing to listen to all the different reasons why we should do this. I indicated to him that there was a study done when I was a city councilman years ago that indicated that we should have one in the north, one in the central, one in the south. And I think that because our fire trucks are going out to troop, and I was up in Conquest the other day, which is half an hour away from Auburn. They were up there fighting a fire. And I think that it's time to have a metropolitan system. I think that we can work with the towns. They have plenty of equipment, plenty of roofs that they can store the equipment in. I think that it's time to merge some of the fire safety issues. And I'd like to see that before we spend $10 million. And when Mr. Daggett came over, I was chairing that night for the public safety, and I was hoping to see the mayor come because this is, you know, an important issue with the city and the county is the public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Mayor Quill, on this issue of building the public safety building on Seminary.
Thank you. As anyone in this room can tell you, I'm the only one that spent any time in that fire station. It was built in approximately 1930, 1931. No, I was not there at that time. It was quite a building in its day. The actual building itself is built like a bridge. The ceilings and the floor for the second floor are hung from the attic through truss systems. When 1930 or 31, when fire trucks were inhabiting there, they were much, much smaller than they are presently. There's approximately 2 to 4 inches additional space to drive the truck through between the doorways. The floor itself was not made to handle the extreme weights of today's fire trucks, which is mandated by federal regulations as far as safety, as far as what it can carry, what it can't carry. We all have the fear of the floor collapsing. There's none of us, I'm sure anyone in this building would want to receive a call in the middle of the night that a fire truck backed into the building and the floor collapsed. The fire station is almost like an island in the ocean any longer. It was built long before the arterial was installed, so they've had to adapt from that. Market Street at one point was quite a thriving neighborhood with homes, stores, storefronts, apartments in the upper floors. Things change. The mention of the earlier city manager did not approve a building plan for the Dunn McCarthy site. I was the fire chief in charge. That is a complete incorrect statement. Thank you.
Mr. Tracy, you'll have 1 minute.
If we're going to spend $990,000 to acquire a building that's zoned incorrectly for that use, that they were aware of that at the time with no plans, no feasibility reports, I'm not arguing against public safety. I'm all about public safety and doing it well. $990,000 would go a long way toward replacing a floor. I'm not buying the liability is so great. If the liability is so great, why would we be putting our guys at risk going in that building every day, putting our equipment at risk? I'd like to see them create an Auburn enlarged fire district, something metropolitan like what Mr. Lattimore was saying.
Okay. Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute.
When I was mayor, on my way out, Roy Bernardi, who was the head of HUD, we were going to put a parking garage behind Lattimore Hall, and we were trying to figure out some way in order to put the fire station in there too, along with these other boxes, one in the north, one in the south, so that we can, the response time would be a lot less than what we have now with the central location.
Okay. Mr. Boyer? Mr. Mayor, do you have any?
No,
Mr.
pass,
Boyer.
thank you.
Okay. Another area that I've heard a good range of thought on is economic development and sort of how we're doing it now, the model that we're using, and what the mayor's role is in that effort. So basically for all three candidates, I'd just like to ask, what is the mayor's role when it comes to economic development, and to what degree should the Cayuga Economic Development Agency be involved with the city's efforts?
Mr. Lattimore, you're up first. You have 2 minutes on this issue of economic development.
Well, I've, as I said, been with the city for a long time. I was on the planning board, both the city and the county, for 10 years. I can remember being a councilman and flying to Dallas. I think young Mayor Cosentino was along with us. We flew down to Texas and made sure that Snyder General didn't go to Brownsville, Tennessee. Part of my contribution was the fact that it was $1 million more to be in Brownsville, Tennessee for health costs than it was in Auburn, New York. And I think by the time we got done with the state and the county and everybody else, we had Mr. Snyder pretty well convinced to build it in Auburn, New York. I've seen a mayor, my father, get on a plane. I've seen council refuse to give him money to get on a plane, but he got it through the Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Peduto flew to Japan and brought back a steel mill, which we've enjoyed in the employment for a number of years. So economic development with the mayor's chair is a very powerful thing. It can work along with other state and elected officials. It can work along with the chamber. It can work along with CETA. But it's still an economic development tool, and I think it's underutilized as it is now.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Quill, the role of the mayor in economic development and CETA.
I believe in CETA. I was one of the founding members of CETA when it first began many years ago. The mayor's job, in the type of government we have presently in the city of Auburn, the mayor, I believe, is a cheerleader for the economic development team. We have some great people on staff in the city, and we occasionally do work with county developers. They know what we have at hand, what we can use, what we can't use, how we go about it. Federal and state government now is allotted more money in a competition type basis. So it's very important and crucial for our economic developers to be aware of that and to have their ear to the ground with the community as to what the community feels is necessary and appropriate for our community. So the mayor as well as the council are all important members, but they need to back off a little bit and let the planners do their work and then assist wherever it's necessary to move forward, as we have in the last 12 years.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tracy, on this issue of economic development, and then we'll hear from Mr. Lattimore for 1 minute.
I think one of the most important parts of the mayor's job is to sit on the IDA. I asked the current administration about that, about certain questions I had about deals the IDA made, who was sitting on it. I did not get a response that Mayor Quill and Terry Cuddy were sitting on it. I did not get that response. That being said, the IDA is the industrial development. I don't see how housing is industrial. You look at what the project at Housing Vision, they spent over $800,000 per house. Their assessor went through, and I just posted one of these on my Reclaiming Auburn site on Facebook. It's assessed at $10,000. We put $800,000 in public money into it to assess it at $10,000 and then give them a 40-year pilot tax deal. So they're paying a fraction of the actual taxes per thousand on a very low assessment. These rents are only about $100 to $150 cheaper than everywhere else. So it's like, not only did you undermine the market, but this didn't result in total rebirth of a neighborhood. People are saying it's just as bad as it was before. Taxes, I'd like to see the city get a hotel tax. I understand that can be 3 to 5% per room. That's taxing people who live out of town. We can't keep taxing the same people who live here regularly for every growing expense. You need to widen the base. I'd like to see a tax on highway commercial. It's zoned that way with the zoning maps. Highway commercial, go up Grant Ave. You could, if we're gonna, this council just approved a half a percent sales tax raise. 4% goes to the state, 2% to the county, and now 2.5% to the city. Lower it downtown and raise it up the arterial. Walmart's always going to undercut the small businesses' prices. That's not taking from local people. I could go on about this, but I'd like to see a commercial property tax based on potential too. Don't just leave Tim Hortons sitting there and pretend that it's only worth a certain amount. It's still leased. It's on a 10-year lease or something. Assess it based on potential as if it was used.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute.
Yes, CETA is funded by a tax that we put against the Oneida Indians. It brings in close to $1 million to the county, and we fund CETA through that. But the mayor's chair, I can remember working with Mr. Wilmot, who had just sold Tyson Corners down in Washington for about $2 billion, and he was interested in building Delago, and Delago was 1,200 jobs and about $900 million that we could have put at Alco, and that would have produced about $8 million in property taxes. Instead, it went down the road. Mr. Wilmot and I flew down to Albany. We talked to Mr. Spitzer, who was having some issues of his own and couldn't really make a decision. But it's one opportunity that went by the boards. Thank you.
There's too many issues there to take 1 minute. 1 minute would go very rapidly, so I'll pass.
All right. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. In terms of some economic development or tourism, a big project that opened this year was the Equal Rights Heritage Center, the facility between City Hall and the YMCA. And now that it's been open for a year, the city does operate the building. There's a budget for that, and on the whole, I'd like to have you each evaluate the impact of that facility, the good, the bad, on the city.
Mayor Quill, you're up first.
Thank you. The Equal Rights Heritage Center to me, has been something that has helped downtown increase its usefulness, its attractiveness to visitors. We all agree to visitors. We want to bring more visitors in because they're spending money, buying gas, staying overnight, using restaurants. The Heritage Center has brought together many things that are going on in our community. They're open with an outdoor show or events on the weekends, every weekend. I don't know what they're going to do during the winter, but I think it's been a definite plus to our community. Many people envisioned it as a museum or something along those lines. That was never the intent. There's been a lot of hard work, a lot of forethought into it. So I think we're on the right track with that, and I hope to enhance it in the future.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Tracy, your thoughts on the Equal Rights Heritage Center?
My first thought is that this is one of those things that the city went ahead and did, regardless of public opinion. You go around door to door, nobody has anything good to say about it. There's like maybe 1 in 100. It's very low. They don't like the design. They don't like the placement. Some of them don't like the principle. Not big on that, but I see a $50,000. This was going to be net zero. We were going to spend as much as it brought in. We're not seeing that. Came in $2.5 million over budget. Instead of being net zero to operate, it costs between $100,000 and $150,000. After they build the building that comes in late and over budget, they decide that now that we have to come up with a marketing strategy. Again, that's something I think would happen with a feasibility report. How do you put $12.5 million into creating some new piercing permanent structure into the middle of a historic district, and then decide, how do we make this work and market it? How do we make people come here? That's very backwards to me. Currently, I think the next step is I'd like to remove that $50,000 part-time position for someone I understand to be a well-connected friend, create a director of Parks and Rec, and use the building for education. You could be housing activities for kids, whether it's a historic society teaching kids about history and having some craft project to go along with it. I think it needs to be an asset for those who live here as well. If people don't want to live here and our population's constantly reducing, why would someone want to visit?
Thank you. Mr. Lattimore, you have 2 minutes on the Equal Rights Heritage Center.
The city makes, I think, according to their website, which is a little late, but about $1 million in parking fees. That particular parking was one of those generators. I'm all in favor of a welcome center. It's location, location, location. Is that the best location? I think that it's damaging the YMCA. I've been a member of the Y since I was 9 years old, and I still utilize it. And it's I think the building now with the membership that the Y has is going to have to make other arrangements. I don't think that they can support what they got. The Heritage Center, all well and good. I mean, it's tourism is part of our economic development, but I don't think it's the end all. And I really didn't like the fact that we had these public hearings. One of the architects was a Harvard graduate. I told him we had 3 Harvard mayors. I told them the history on the Shipley Bullfinch architectural, and they went ahead and built that look, which I think, a woman's union look, especially it's 100 years of voting for women. I mean, it would have been a perfect equal rights heritage thing if it looked a little bit like the old women's union. Maybe downsize it a little bit, but it would have been a lot better look than what we have there now.
Mr. Tracy, you'll have 1 minute.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was actually very disturbed by this. We spent $12.5 million, and not on time either. And for that, we couldn't even use local labor. The architect came from Massachusetts. I believe the plumber came from Syracuse. Nobody came from here. How do you bring $12.5 million in new economic activity here and then hire everyone who doesn't come from here? That was disturbing to me. And if they do say that they hired one individual or something, I would have liked to see all of it come to local people.
Mr. Boyer.
Okay. Another issue that came out of some of the downtown construction work is the parking situation. The state DOT funded a large portion of the reconstruction of Genesee Street, and City Council said that they were told they have to institute back-in parking for safety reasons. It was either that or go to parallel parking. So basically the question is, going forward, we've heard a lot of complaints about just navigating that, doing that. Is there room to redo it? Is there room to try something different? And how would you go about doing that given what the state is saying?
Okay, I believe, Mr. Tracy, you're up first.
If I could ask a question, when you say that the council was told they had to do this, I had the understanding the council was told if they wanted to use state money, they'd have to make the change.
Correct.
See, seeing as how the public's so against this whole backing in thing, I would think that if I were leading an administration, I would go to the public and say, we have this choice. We can either do these things to raise taxes, maybe it's a gas tax, it's unpopular, but we could do it that way and leave the parking the way you like it, with more spots and driving in face forward, or we can take the state money. There's these 2 alternatives. You could have done a referendum on a ballot. I mean, there were many ways to do this, and it's being so unpopular, I'm surprised they proceeded. I guess it's just that when you have such an incredible majority for your party, you know that there's no wrong way to go. It's one-party rule, and one-party rule, you can do what you want, I guess. The back-end parking, my understanding is where the road gets more narrow going out west. Now people are driving face first over the double yellow line into traffic, and it's come to the DOT's attention that this way of backing in to resolve that issue hasn't actually done that at all. Now you have to, where the road gets more narrow, you have to cross forward across the double yellow into oncoming traffic to back up into a spot. People want to hear me say that we're just going to end it. We're going to end it as soon as I go in there. We're going to send a guy out with a can of paint, which is unrealistic. And being that we've used state money, I expect that if we were going to make that change, we'd have to see that we'd follow state guidelines now that we spent the state's money.
Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 2 minutes on back-end parking.
Yeah, we all know that it's an issue. A lot of people aren't using the downtown parking, but I got to back up to the Welcome Center one time. In different parts of my career, we've had different proposals for that. At one time, there was a bank proposed, and that would have generated, if it was a $10 million build-out, it would have generated, $600,000 in property taxes. So with the overhead that we have, and with the missed opportunity to maybe having a taxable property there, it's about $1 million turnaround in income. But anyways, the illegal, being illegal, crossing a double solid line, the back end is, it's illegal. I don't know how the state ever came up with allowing people to cross the double solid line when they back in. And with the backup cameras that we have today, I think the other way, technology-wise, would have been okay if we continued. I'm in the insurance business. I didn't see that many accidents, but what do I know?
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Mayor Quill, on this issue of back-in parking as part of the state grant.
A couple of things. I'm not sure of how you cross a double yellow line to back into a parking space. To me, it just doesn't make sense how you would go about that. Regardless, the state gave us $6.1 million to rebuild Genesee Street from the West End McDonald's to the area of the Four Corners downtown. Is the project near completion? It was quite an involved development. We were notified by the state DOT. They ran the numbers, checked all the accident figures, and they told us we could have two choices. We could have parallel parking, which we would lose 44 spots, or we could go with the back-end parking. As mentioned here earlier, it's illegal to cross a double solid line to pull into a parking space. That is illegal. We were unhappy about the back-end parking. Myself, the city manager, the city clerk met with Senator DeFrancisco, pleading our case, hoping to get some changes. And the senator says you're just going to have to live with it.
Continue, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You're being interrupted.
No, we just have to live with it, and that's the way it is. There was talk we could, once the road was completed and finished, we could readjust and go back to the drive-in parking, but that's not allowed by state DOT. So basically, we're under state DOT to stay with the back-end parking.
I apologize, Mayor. There was just some distraction out here. Mr. Tracy, you'll have 1 minute if you wanted to follow up. I thought I got the high sign from you.
Yeah, I'm not sure why the mayor doesn't know how you would cross a double yellow line. Myself and Mr. Lattimore see it. You go to back end, you need to make room. You have to go forward, especially where the road gets more narrow on the west end. The only way to go forward far enough is to go across that double yellow line to back up. Anyone who drives would see that. I talked to a lot of seniors. There are a lot of seniors who say this is specifically difficult for them. Handicapped people that can't, coming and going from their cars, it's harder for them. They say they'll never go downtown again. When there's that risk of doing this to local businesses, again, I would have done a ballot referendum. We can either do this and come up with the money locally, raising taxes, whatever we had to do, or maybe spending the money more wisely so we don't have to raise taxes, but it could have been a choice. It's so widely disliked that even the mayor knows it.
Mr. Lattimore, did you want to respond, or?
Backup parking?
Yeah, no.
Or anything?
No. On this question, I thought you were giving me the high sign. If not, I'll.
Oh.
Okay.
No, I think parking's over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just so that if you're,
Well,
go ahead.
One thing, I went downtown, took out a few of my customers, went in the Parkers, spent some money, came out, had a $20 ticket, and because my wheels were on the line, I got another $15 for double parking or something. So it cost me not only lunch, it cost me another $35 just for parking. So I think maybe we're charging a little too much for the fines.
Well, we made the spots more narrow when we did this too.
Yeah.
Lost a few of them.
Mr. Mayor, anything? Okay. I'm going to.
Any night of the week that I'm downtown, there's not a parking spot to be found. So apparently, not everyone is discouraged by back-end parking.
Can't find them because there's fewer.
Excuse me.
All right. Now I'll interject now. We'd like to let you know, if you're just tuning in, this is the forum for the City of Auburn mayor's race for 2019. We have all three candidates who are running for mayor that you can vote for. In fact, starting now, because early voting started on Saturday. But you can go to the polls on November 5th, a week from today, to vote for either Brett Tracy, who's on the Libertarian line, Timothy C. Lattimore, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines, or Mayor Michael D. Quill, who is seeking a fourth term, who's on the Democratic, Working Families, and Auburn Party. We'll now turn to Mr. Boyer for his next question.
Okay. I'd like to talk about the Auburn Double Days, the baseball team. Some big news came out from Major League Baseball and Minor League Baseball a week or two ago about some proposals to totally restructure how the system works, and it was pretty clear that they're looking at small markets like Auburn to no longer have affiliated Major League Baseball team affiliated franchises. So that's a big issue for Auburn to confront, because we own the team. The city is the Double Days. So my question, given sort of the landscape, the attendance we've seen at Doubledays games has been going down a couple years in a row. How should the mayor and the city council approach the Doubledays question as we go forward?
Mr. Lattimore, you're up. You have 2 minutes on the issue of the Doubledays.
Yes. Mr. King and myself and Mayor Loughran, I think, voted to upgrade the park back in the day, and we all love baseball. At the county, we just had the Timmy LaCastro Day. There was 3 Auburn Doubleday players, I think, playing in the World Series, along with Mr. Corbin from Central New York. So we love baseball. You know, it's nice that the college here went in with the city to upgrade again the field, put some Astro in. But I'd love to see our college take advantage of the NASA program that we have up here. I think we're underutilizing the college and that platform that Congressman Walsh gave us. His name's on the building. So, I mean, I'm all in favor of baseball, but I'd like to see this institution do a little bit more. That's college, my alma mater. Turn things around and really create some big jobs. We just laid 400 miles of fiber optic cable in the county. That would help with getting things going.
But how would you specifically work to try to either keep the Doubledays, or is it something you're not interested in? I mean, is it past time when we have to spend money to keep the Doubledays going? Well,
I think that the city is the only one that owns a license, but the problem is going to be that there's going to be 20 licenses on the market at one time. So it would probably go cheaper than what it should be. So I'm not sure, you know, if Major League Baseball has said that's the end of it, it's over.
We'll turn now to Mayor Quill on this issue of what should the city and city council do in regards to the Doubledays.
In this regard, I'm an eternal optimist. As I told you before, Mr. Boyer, I remember going there since about 1959. I was 10 years old. I certainly do not want to lose major minor league baseball in Auburn. But if the big leagues decide it's more profitable for them, they're going to do what's more profitable for them. That's their business. I have the feeling that when it all is shaken out, I don't think minor league baseball is going to be leaving. Personally, I think it's a bargaining chip on the part of the major league, the major leagues. The park, the Bell Park is an excellent spot. Mr. Lattimore talked about the college. Yes, we partner with the college, the city does, with our ball field. We have men and women's lacrosse and soccer. It's played 9 months out. There's sports going on there 9 months of the year now, other than minor league baseball, versus 3 months previous. It's been a terrific asset share between the college and the city. I'm glad we did it. Hopefully we'll have minor league baseball, but the park won't go for a lack of use.
Thank you, Mayor Quill. And we'll now turn to Mr. Tracy. You have 2 minutes on the Doubledays.
To be honest, I'm not big into sports or baseball, but the federal government does things like NASA, and people argue that whether NASA makes sense to do or it's a necessity, it's good for morale. The people dream a little bigger, and I think that's the same thing that happens with this park and baseball. The middle class isn't specifically doing well, though, and those are the people who are going to go spend their money on tickets, on food, go to this baseball game. You can see with this, there's a GE owns a baseball park for kids, and I guess they couldn't get any kids signed up, so they're not doing that now. These are like very typical middle class things. You have baseball teams for kids. You have people go with their family to a game. They buy a hot dog. You know, that's very typical middle class stuff. Underprivileged people aren't doing that. They have no way to get there. They have no way to get back. I think as long as the permanent underclass is perpetuated in the city, you're not going to see this turnaround. I'd like to, though.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. I'd like to ask you about, the person who, you're all running for mayor, but the person who is the day-to-day CEO of city government is the city manager under our form of government. So I'd like to ask you about him. Jeff Dygert's been in the job for a few years now, and so I'd like to ask you a two-part question, really, evaluate the process that led to his hiring, and then the work he's been doing in the job so far.
Mayor Quill, I think you're up first.
Sure, I want to make some notes here so I can answer both parts of the question. When Mr. Selby decided to resign, he notified me. I asked his advice as to who we should hire as a temporary city manager, because we did do a nationwide search. We had people from all over apply for the job. We had one local person who owned a home at the foot of the lake, was an Auburn address, and when they found out that that was not considered part of the city, they withdrew their name. But Mr. Dygert jumped in on a temporary basis. He did a fantastic job. The longer that myself and City Council worked with him, the more impressed we were with what he has done, what he continues to do. So I think I'm answering your question here, but the bottom line is myself and the City Council are very impressed and very happy. I believe the employees are also happy, which makes a difference in any job. They have no special treatment. They're treated fairly and treated as professionals.
Thank you, Mayor Quill. Mr. Tracy, on the hiring of Jeff Dygert and his performance.
At the risk of retaliation, I guess I'm going to criticize him. They performed a nationwide search and found someone with no experience or education for the job. We then paid him a massive salary and then paid for his education too. I know that with problems I've had that I've been told to go to the city manager, the mayor has directed me there himself. I was told that these people who were presenting problems for me were acting as rogue agents of the government. They understood it was a problem but didn't want to take action against their employees. I feel that the morale of the public is more important than the morale of the employee, or especially a rogue agent, or several of them. Those people in City Hall, they're to serve you. They're not there to serve anyone else. Their happiness comes secondary to the public's. Mr. Dygert then told me, along with the mayor, that I shouldn't come to City Hall unless I come with a lawyer. And when they continued to harass me, along with many others, this is not an uncommon story. I go door to door. People tell me they have these problems. They go to the people. It backfires. I told Mr. Dygert that I really need this inappropriate behavior to stop. He knows that. My grandfather's sick. I'd like to spend some time with him. I was told, well, then you should choose between leaving the city and divesting or seeing your grandparents. That's how do you do that and justify that you're about growing the city? That's not growth. It's a very poor management style.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Lattimore, on the process to hire City Manager Dygert and his performance.
I've had the opportunity to have the mayor as my fire chief and Jeff working with the fire department. I mean, our public safety budget is huge, and I know that he knows the fire angle pretty well. I'm a little concerned about the police department. I think the paper has put in a couple articles in regards to some of the drug task force issues. I hope that we can see neighborhood policing. I'd like to see a policeman downtown. I mean, I was downtown the other day. There was one woman who was a little bit out of control, yelling and screaming. I had to have I was at the gas station, and I had somebody accost me in regards to, you know, I'm going to kill your kids. I got your license plate. And so I'd like to see some actual beats downtown. You know, good weather. I don't care if it's, you know, I'd like to see Jeff work the police a little bit differently than they are now. I think that you know, we have some issues with some clientele with the health department, and I'd like to see a cop on a beat. I like to see him shaking some doors. I'd like to see him knowing his neighborhood. I mean, when I go door to door, I see a crack house, and then when I go back in 4 years, because I've run against Mike a couple times now, I see the same crack house. and the neighbors all know it's there. Knock it off. I want zero tolerance for drug dealers. And I'd like to see Jeff pick that up a little bit better.
Mr. Tracy, then Mr. Quill.
Yeah, the city manager's job as far as the police department goes, I really think they need to get these empty positions filled in the police department. They need more officers. I'd like to see them engaging with people on the streets directly. I think it goes a long way when you can actually know the officer by name. They know you by name. Creates a sense of community that's probably worth keeping. I think that's pretty much it.
Mayor Quill,
One
one minute.
Thank you. One thing both gentlemen have mentioned, and it is a problem, is the personnel in our police department. We're losing them. We're losing them very rapidly. When these men and women come up with 20 years retirement, they're walking away, whereas the old timers would be there for many, many years afterwards. It's a very stressful job. My son-in-law is a police officer, and I've had not in the city of Auburn, had many conversations about the stress and how things have changed nationally and what has to be done. And that's the million-dollar question. How do we enhance more police officers that are good police officers? Thank you.
Mr. Tracy, then Mr. I'm going by the way I notice you. So Mr. Tracy, you get 1 minute, then Mr. Lattimore, 1 minute.
On that note, the only thing I would say, it's a very disturbing, weak excuse as far as I'm concerned. You report the same drug house, like Mr. Lattimore was saying, it's always the same one. It never changes, it's been that way a long time. And the police tell you, we're building a case. You mean you're getting overtime to sit here and watch these people. Meanwhile, as far as I'm concerned, adults who want to do drugs, that's their business. The drug dealer is the person making people sick. You go in and stop that. Don't build your case. Don't wait for it to turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars to then be seized and lots of excuses for overtime. We could probably hire a lot of new police officers, but the overtime's through the roof, where that money could be spent much better and more effectively on salaries.
Mr. Tracy, Mr. Lattimore, 1 minute.
Yeah, the guaranteed overtime that's in the contract might be a little too rich, and I know that the fire department has 4 assistant chiefs where the police department only has 1. I'd like to see that maybe change up. But I know we're going to have to pay more for our police officers. It is getting to be a dangerous job, as the mayor said. I mean, public doesn't support it as much, the men in blue and ladies in blue. But I do want to see them out of the car, good weather. They can come out for half an hour or whatever, change it up a little bit, move around a little bit. Don't be so predictable when you're on your routes.
Mayor Quill, I'll give you 1 minute, and then we're going to go to the final question from Mr. Boyer.
I would suggest to anyone that most of us have an iPad or a laptop, something. You can put the radio frequencies on for the police department. I would suggest you listen to the Auburn police for a couple of days. They run from one call to the next to the next. It's not like the old days where they didn't do that. Now it's just a continuous, and most of the calls they end up with 2 cars there because the possibility of how it could sour. So I would just suggest that. Thank you.
Mr. Boyer, last question.
Well, I'm going to ask it for one-on-one for all 3, and I think it should be pretty straightforward. So,
explain this to me.
Good luck. Good luck.
Okay.
Basically, just each candidate, I have a question for.
Oh, okay.
I
So,
think, yeah.
So then we won't do rebuttals.
Right.
We'll give 1 minute at the very end
I
if
think
we have time.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So basically, just for each of you, you each kind of bring different levels of experience and background. So I'll start with you, Mr. Tracy. Obviously, this is your first foray into running for elected office. So for a voter, they're going to say, or some voters may say, hey, he doesn't have experience. Maybe he doesn't have the knowledge of the inner workings of City Hall and government. What do you say to voters who have that on their mind as they make the decision?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Honestly, I don't think that not having a political experience is a flaw. I think knowing how to work with people and communicate face to face. People have interesting stories and hyperbole, but most people who talk to me have a very productive discussion and we come to some agreement. I think that's important. That when you say something, you mean it, and you're going to carry it out. I've been volunteering with numerous organizations, taking positions on fundraising committees, finance committees, handicapped accessibility committees since I was 14. First time I was elected to something, it was with Skills USA and BOCES. I have some education from this college, some credits from RIT, some from another community college, a trade school certificate. I'm not uneducated, and my mom's been in local government like this my whole life. I'm used to the discussions, used to hearing about who's negotiating what terms of what deal. Think it's time for a change and some new blood.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Boyer, for Mr. Lattimore, I think he's up next.
Yeah. So, Mr. Lattimore, this is your fourth time running against Mr. Quill, and as we all know, you've lost the previous three. So, really, for a voter out there, I think a key question for this year's campaign is, what is different this time about your candidacy that would change their mind?
Well, let me just say that my father never raised somebody to be afraid to get in the ring and try to get something done. There's some changes that I'd like to see in the city. I mean, I've grown up in this city, and I think we need some change. I mean, when the water and sewer taxes are out of hand and it's driving people out of their homes, you know, we've got to bring in some more industry, like GE, like Alco, that use water. I mean, the only product the city sells is water. I mean, I put in a 47-point thing in our new watershed regs. I haven't seen anything from the present mayor in regards to how he's going to protect the only product that the city sells is water. I'm drinking bottled water today. I didn't drink tap. But I think that, you know, winners sometimes fail, but they don't quit. And that's me. I'm not going to quit on Auburn. As you know, I'm still engaged, and I'll continue to be engaged because, you know, I'd like to see the next generation stay here and live here and retire here like I'm going to do. I mean, Auburn's been a great community for me, and I'm going to continue to do everything I can to make it better. And if by running against Mike, you know, makes something come out that's going to be better, whether it's neighborhood policing, then it's for a good thing. It's a good cause.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lattimore. I'm assuming the next one's for Mr. Quill.
Yep.
Mayor Quill?
Good guess.
Been
Mayor,
doing this for a while.
Yeah, Mayor Quill. For you, the question is, you know, a three-term incumbent. That's 12 years in the mayor's seat. You know, in this day and age, we hear a lot of people talk about term limits as something we should do. We should. It's always, you know, there's always an interest in getting some new voices and some new blood into City Hall. So what do you say to voters who think, you know, it's just time to get some new perspective in there?
I don't disagree with them, but at the same time, the voters have the choice. If they're tired of Mike Quill as mayor, that's up to them to do what they have to do in the voters' booth. I feel we still have a few more things to accomplish. I feel we've come a long way, and I want us to continue in that regard. But as I told you, in regards to having 5 members of the same party on council, the voters keep re-electing us. They're happy with what we're doing. So they're the final choice, and as far as I'm concerned, they are the term limits for any position, elected position.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Boyer, thank you. Thanks for doing this for the last 7 times. So we appreciate it.
It's been a fun month. Thank you.
Looking forward to having you here in the spring for the school board.
That's right.
Forum.
Yes.
We do want to thank all 3 of you. We're going to turn to 2-minute closing statements. As we said, we were going to reverse order. Mayor Michael D. Quill is up first. He's on the Democratic Working Families Party and the Auburn Party line. Mayor.
Thank you. I'd like to start out by thanking Mr. Cosentino, the staff and students of Q Community College, Mr. Boyer from our local newspaper, and everyone who has a role in producing this debate. The city of Auburn has come a long way in the past years. There has been much growth and progress, and with the support of all the voters in our city, the progress will continue. The Downtown Revitalization Initiative, once again, it was a $10 million investment from the state, but that will leverage another $25 million from private investors. We continuously hear that our neighborhoods and playgrounds should be a priority. Our city staff has done a tremendous job in that direction. Clifford Park, Casey Park Playgrounds, St. Francis Playground are now open, and soon Bradford Street Playground will be rebuilt. Our city attorneys, along with code enforcement and our neighborhood cleanup crew, have worked continuously to improve all neighborhoods and will continue to do so in the future. I do not believe in knocking my opponent's ideas or opinions, but instead point to the last 12 years and how far we have come and have given the opportunity where we'll be in the next 4 years. Thank you for your support over the last 12 years and humbly ask for your vote and confidence to elect me once again this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Quill. We'll now hear from Q County Deputy Chairman Timothy C. Lattimore, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines. Mr. Lattimore.
Thank you very much for the college and Jamie, and we got 3 mayors here tonight. That's
Get a
big.
fourth, we'll have whatever.
Full house. As you know, Auburn is a great place, but we need to bring in industry for jobs. We need to cut frivolous spending. We need safe communities. We need to combat the heroin epidemic. We need safe drinking water. We need to lower our sewer and water taxes. As you might have read over the weekend, there was an editorial in the Famous Citizen by a CPA indicating that water and sewer increased 69%. Now, when I was mayor, or when Mr. Cosentino was mayor, I know we had to do some upgrades, but I mean this is totally out of hand. And the total property taxes were up like 35% over the last couple of years. So we need a tax base. I know that everybody touts this downtown revitalization. Let me tell you, I was on the planning board when we put up the senior citizen housing. When we it was just over the weekend that they opened up the new Brooklyn Wegmans. It was my niece was down there, and Danny Wegman was there, and indicated that because of a mayor of past. That's why Wegmans is there. So the mayor can do a lot of good things, and I hope that we can continue to build downtown. But downtown isn't the whole city. Downtown, people want their neighborhoods back, and we need that local or that neighborhood policing to get in there and clean up those neighborhoods so that we don't have any kind of crime that's going on year after year. And if we got to hire more policemen to do that, to lower the frequency, then let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. We'll now finish up with Brett Tracy, who's on the Libertarian line. Mr. Tracy, you have 2 minutes to finish up.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that by my calculations, property taxes raised to the maximum each year would bring in only $180,000 worth of revenue, new revenue that is. If you keep raising it to the maximum each year, you only get $180,000 worth of new revenue. The city spends $35 million now. $35 million isn't touched by $180,000. There's a growing budget gap, according to the city's own comptroller. The state comptroller didn't have very good things to say about us either. The water, sewer, trash funds, all those enterprise funds, the administrative charges are going through the roof, and getting the money transferred back to fund balance is a legal way to transfer money when you're looking to create new taxes that would otherwise not be legal. I guess the real question is, do you think this city is going the direction you'd like it to? And after 12 years, are you seeing the types of change that you'd like to see? I can't say I am, but that's just it. And if I was to reiterate, I'd say part of my opening statement, the last paragraph, I don't see our city as a place that needs to look to its past for greatness. I really don't. I see Auburn as a place of tremendous potential to be built on a past of wonderful history. A city of individuals who've been once again asked to foot the bill and pay all the bills so government can decide best how to spend your money and tax your behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, I refuse to believe that our problems come from the citizens living too richly. I believe the government is living too richly. With your support, I ask for you to vote for me this election day and continue making history in history's hometown. To hear more things on the issues, I'd ask for you to look my campaign up on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy, and thank you to all 3 of you for putting yourselves out there before the voters campaigning, not always easy for yourselves or your families, but we wish you well in the next week as you wind down the campaigns or speed it up depending on your perspective. We'd also again like to thank Mr. Boyer, who's been dedicated to this process for years, and we appreciate his time. And we finally want to thank you for tuning in for races that were important to you. We do urge you to exercise your right to vote on November 5th, or if you want to take advantage of early voting, it started on Saturday, October 26th. You can vote in Auburn at the Clifford Park, once better known as the Y Field, or you can go down to Venice or Conquest to vote as well. We'll return to our regular program of Inside Government Beyond the Front Page next week on Election Day. Next Tuesday, Dr. Adam Effler will be here to give us an update on Owasco Lake and what has been occurring there with harmful algae blooms and other work that his group is doing. Our future guests include Cuyahoga County Sheriff Brian Skank, City Manager Jeff Dygert, former New York State Senator John DeFrancisco will be on to talk about his new book, as well as representatives from Nick's Ride, local veterans efforts, and a new health initiative by the county to help pregnant moms. Because of the number of forums that we have held this year, the Citizen has them on their website at auburnpub.com immediately upon their being taped, as well as they are downloaded immediately to the college's website for YouTube. The Auburn Regional Media Access, ARMA, will run this forum on Saturday and Sunday on Spectrum 12 and 98 and FiOS 31 starting at 5 p.m. And the college's radio station will be broadcasting this on 89.1 starting at 10 a.m. We return again, as I said, to our regular program on Tuesday. We hope you'll join us here in the studio. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Have a good night, have a great tomorrow, and don't forget to vote. And you're still on until they...